I am delighted to be back at the center. I'd like to thank Glenda for that very warm introduction. I first came to the center in 1985 to a gay and lesbian independent Democrats meeting at the time. I believe that Deborah Glick was the chair of the organization. And I was running for the Senate on the Upper West Side in Harlem, in Manhattan. But I thought it would be important to come down and let the gay and lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community to know that they had a friend on the Upper West Side in Harlem. The only problem is that my opponent, who at the time was Galen Kirkland, the Human Rights Commissioner in New York, he also came to this meeting and spoke because he wanted to let the LGBT community know that they had a friend on the Upper West Side and in Harlem. And so I think both of us made it very clear that the fight for equal rights for everyone extended throughout this borough and inevitably throughout the state. And so I'd like to thank for his service the outgoing chair of the Center, Bruce Anderson, and the incoming chair, Tom Palumbo. And I would especially like to thank for their hard work and effort the sponsors of the legislation for gender equality, State Senator Tom Duane and Assemblyman Richard Dawes. I'd also like to thank three of my other colleagues who are here today. Our home Assemblywoman, Deborah Glick. The sponsor who got marriage equality passed in the Assembly 3 times, Danny O'Donnell. And this community's friend on the Upper East Side, Assemblyman Michael Kelly. I would also like to thank a long fighter for this day that is here, Melissa Sklar, who is the chair of New Yorkers for Gender Rights Project organization. And for a moment, I would just like to acknowledge the passing of one of the great New Yorkers who fought for human rights and freedoms for everyone, who passed away earlier this week, the former Human Rights Commissioner of the city, Dennis DeLeo. Yeah. Now, New York has long been the epicenter for the civil rights movements and for the declaration of single classes of people that they deserve the same freedoms and dignity that exists in the Declaration of Independence and in our founding United States Constitution. Women called out for that right to vote in 1848 in a conference at Glens Falls. African Americans called out for many different inequalities to be rectified at a conference in Niagara Falls, Canada in 2009. The conference held on the Canadian side of the border because the African Americans couldn't get rooms in Niagara County. And also right here, very close to where we are now, in 1969, the LGBT movement was sparked at an incident in the Stonewall Inn. And at that time, rising up against that kind of oppression and conformity, among those who rose up were transgender people who were the objects of the greatest discrimination, the greatest disparagement, probably of any class. And what we are here to do today is to try to begin to rectify that indignity, that treatment of so many people, so many Americans, who by the expression of their gender identity or expression have been systematically kept out of all kinds of activities and opportunities here in this country. And yet, 40 years after the incident at Stonewall, 13 states now recognize gender expression. Our neighboring state of New Jersey, Maine, Iowa, Oregon. There are 90 counties and municipalities that recognize gender expression, such as New York City. and it is listed as a protected class by the federal government in the Matthew Shepard hate crimes bill that was passed just a couple of months ago. So the question is, where is New York? And the answer lies in a struggle, and I would say a kind of a moral struggle that myself and Senator Tom Duane have undergone for the last 7 years. We held out from passing the Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act because we wanted full inclusion of everyone in that legislation. We knew that the passage of that legislation would be flawed. And I had held out in 1987 against New York's hate crimes bill, along with an assemblyman named Roger Green, because it didn't include sexual orientation as a protected class. We had to wait 13 years to get a bill that covered everybody, but it was worth the wait. But the reason that we allowed that bill to go forward that day, it was a one-time offer from Governor Paterson. And since it seemed that he might be around forever, we probably thought that maybe we could take advantage of that opportunity, and we voted in the Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act. But the reality is that both Senator Duane and I have increasingly become exhausted over the time that it's taken for there to be the right gender identity and expression legislation to pass. And we're still waiting for it. So as I'm starting to learn in government more and more, if you want something done, you have to do it yourself. And I am therefore today issuing an executive order that commands the agencies of the state of New York that for purposes of decision-making and employment, and that there will be no discrimination of anyone based on their gender identity or expression. Far too long, and long after other counties, municipalities, and even states have recognized it, the transgender community has had to wait for what are the same freedoms and equalities that everyone else enjoys in terms of employment and choices all around this state. And as far as state employees are concerned, that problem ends today. But as much as I am delighted to sign this executive order, I am aware that my action is incomplete. I still demand that the New York State Senate take up a gender equality bill and pass it immediately. Among other things I'd like to get to work on. But I would like to congratulate publicly Senator Tom Duane for his steadfast Now, it's not like we don't love our sponsor, Dick Godfrey, and the other assembly members that are here. But, you know, you do have to give consideration for what we call in government degree of difficulty. It is unfortunate that after women cried out for their independence in 1848, that they had to wait 72 years to receive the right to vote, that African Americans who cried out for their freedoms in 1909 had to wait 55 years for the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. It's a shame that after Stonewall, 40 years later, there are so many lesbian and gay, bisexual and transgender people who are denied the opportunity for marriage equality here in a country where 5 states already recognize it. But I think that we have to understand that the arch, as Dr. King once said, that the arch of freedom bends toward equality, but it isn't always a straight path. And so I'd like to thank Alan Van Capel, the Empire State Fire.